It's September 11th, 2025, and yesterday Charlie Kirk, a very popular conservative commentator, was assassinated, and millions, if not billions of us witnessed this happen on the internet. And if we're not careful, this assassination will be the beginning of the end of this experiment known as democracy, reason, tolerance, debate, and we could be setting ourselves back to a place that we really don't want to go. My only tie to Charlie Kirk was that I helped Jubilee develop a debate series called Surrounded, and Charlie was the first guest on that show. A lot of you saw that video. It's one of the most viewed videos on Jubilee's channel. And I think that really speaks to the power and intensity and effectiveness of Charlie as a communicator. And it also highlights a crossroads that we're at when it comes to digesting ideas that we're uncomfortable with, digesting information and opinions that we're uncomfortable with as a society. I think the most obvious thing to point out, and probably the most urgent thing to point out, is if you are celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk, you are morally poisoned. I want to offer grace to people who are not fully thinking this through. I want to offer an opportunity to clear your thoughts and come to terms with the horror of what happened yesterday. 2 children lost their father and will likely have to relive the publicness of their father's death for the rest of their lives. This is going to be an unimaginable trauma for them. Same with Charlie's wife, and same with many, many people who rushed to his aid, tried to save him, and witnessed the event. If you are somebody who criticized Charlie's ideas because you felt that they disregarded human dignity, or were bad for democracy, or were un-American, and you cheer and celebrate what happened to him, you've forfeited the validity of your concerns, because celebrating an assassination of somebody is an abandonment of all of those values. Celebrating the death of a political opponent is abandoning reason, morality, a valid stance on human decency, human worth, justice. If those are values that you hold to be true and you are celebrating Charlie's death, those you can't do both. What I'm really horrified by is the callousness and, quite frankly, the moral confusion of many young and old people on the left whose initial instinct was to turn on their phones and act like this was a win for whatever they perceived their political team to be, because it was not. And I'm also disturbed by elected officials who immediately chose to hyper-politicize it and cast blame on an entire group of Americans for their speech and paint that as the reason that this happened. Free speech is free speech. Violence is violence. We can choose to live in a society that embraces debate or violence. Violence is the alternative to debate as the method to resolve our differences. The alternative to debate is violence. We have to choose one. We have to choose to allow people like Charlie Kirk to peacefully engage with those they disagree with. And Charlie invited those he disagreed with wholeheartedly to engage with him, and that was the right thing to do. If we reject that or paint that as morally wrong or obsess over the feelings that debate arouses in us and let that cloud our judgment around the validity of violence, and then we turn a blind eye towards violence, that's a slippery slope. That's a path we don't want to go down. I also hear a lot of people talking about a civil war. In a very dark coincidence, I actually posted a video about the Civil War yesterday because I visited some of the battle sites on a personal trip recently. And I've been doing some research about the Civil War just to educate myself, know more about the event. The amount of death it introduced to the American reality is really unfathomable. If you truly believe that a civil war is necessary, you believe that all of the people you know and love, their safety and well-being should be essentially left to chance. You're embracing a chaotic, bloody world. There's been a lot of criticism towards media that platforms both sides, media that attempts to facilitate debate and disagreement. If we as a culture reject the validity of at least trying to facilitate debate, trying to facilitate discourse as the standard way to address our differences, if we reject that and get lost in the moral equation of whether that is appropriate or inappropriate, and if we somehow make that taboo and unacceptable, then the only alternative is violence. If you don't believe that there's any validity in your opponent's beliefs and opinions and values and perspective, then you find yourself in a place where you excuse violence done to them. And I think that's what's happened, is a lot of people have been convinced and have convinced themselves that there's no point in talking to each other. There's no point in talking to somebody who I think is morally wrong. And in fact, I even condemn anyone else who tries to listen to them or tries to engage with them in conversation. And what that's left us with is a indifference that accepts and tacitly embraces violence done to those we disagree with. I think something a lot of people need to realize is Charlie was incredibly smart, and there are a lot of uncomfortable truths that he shared on a regular basis. There are a lot of moral stances. There are a lot of moral arguments on the left that don't hold themselves together. And that's not to say that there aren't better arguments. There aren't better ways of advocating for values that were different than Charlie's. But what I've seen a lot of people do, and what I've seen a lot in our culture, is when somebody can effectively land an argument that they reject or that makes them upset or that pushes culture in a direction that they don't want, they, rather than being humble and taking the time to find a better argument or to acknowledge the truths and reconcile some of the truths in the opinion you disagree with, you just dehumanize the other side, and the next thing you know, you're celebrating their assassination. Obviously, I think people should pray or dedicate some silence and reverence to Charlie and his family, and meditate on the significance of this terrible event, and realize that we all collectively have a choice here. We can continue going down a path that will lead to tragedy in all directions. One path is a guaranteed tragedy. More death, more bloodshed, no justice, no human dignity. Moral bankruptcy all around. And there's another path that is going to be much more difficult to achieve, but that is grace, intellectual humility, intellectual honesty, reason, charity, sacrificing your politics, open-mindedness, courage. That's the path we should choose. There's an element to all of this, which is the algorithm or the algorithms, and how they act as a gas pedal to all of our collective fight and flight responses, or whatever's going on in our brains that's addicted to this feeling, addicted to this sense of crisis and this rush of and thrill of horror. It's important for us all to acknowledge that we're kind of addicted to what's happening right now. I've participated in this media ecosystem and have a lot of conflicted feelings about it, but so have almost all of us. Or it's something we're all a part of. The algorithm is bigger than our own agency in a lot of ways, I believe. And so whoever is in a position of power to explore ways that we can create algorithms that access our better selves, I would just ask that that be something we try. We have a choice of where we want to go from here. Thanks for listening. Until next time.